everywhere pod.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. Hope you guys have enjoyed the show thus far. We are going to be looking at right now some fantasy stars of the NFL this past weekend, week 2. Crazy storylines here. A lot of different things happened, a lot of players that we could have talked about, but the list that I've called together here is highly indicative of some surprising teams and some teams that feel like they can be contenders right now. But without further ado, let us jump right into it. If you have any comments as well, I would love to hear them because I have my own personal fantasy stars, but you might have been impressed by other performances as well. Without further ado, let's talk about my personal fantasy stars of the week. How about Derek Carr, man? Let's talk about Derek Carr. I did say a little bit earlier in the month that the one saving grace about Derek Carr that could prevent him from being a kind of bench rider or waiver wire option in fantasy is his deep ball. But as much as he and Rashid Shaheed had developed that deep connection, he really is proving that his offense really can take on many different colors here. He can wear many different hats in this offense. He had a long screen touchdown. He had that deep route to Rashid Shaheed, and he kept everyone involved. 21.82 fantasy points, 243 yards through the air, 2 TDs, 1 interception. Really impressive what I'm seeing from Derek Carr. He looks 5 years younger, and it just goes to show that in an offensive system that you feel like you can take advantage of, you can shine no matter your age. And Clint Kubiak is doing a great job early on in the season, really setting the tone for these guys in that Saints offense. And looking at the Saints right now, this Saints offense could be scary. They have a lot of speed. They have a lot of options in the receiving game, whereas beforehand, a lot of people were saying, oh, it's going to be Derek Carr's fault that this team can't get going. Now they can confidently say that Derek Carr can be the answer going forward for the Saints. But let's talk about his backfield partner as well, because we have to give him credit. His second 4-touchdown performance, Alvin Kamara, 44 fantasy points, 20 carries, 115 yards, 3 TDs on the ground. And I had my concerns about Alvin Kamara because even though we've talked about him very positively here on this podcast, I think that age was one of the factors that came into play. And he is aging, but like fine wine is what Alvin Kamara is right now. And Alvin Kamara just profiles as someone who is back like he never left. And if he's really committed to this offense, and Clint Kubiak is really committed to getting him the ball, he'll be a breath of fresh air. And I think that the Saints really need him in order to truly be seen in my mind as contenders, because I have faith that somehow, some way, the NFC South is going to get muddier than usual. I think that the Buccaneers and Saints are aberrations in terms of their 2-0 starts, and the Falcons could go 0-2 tonight, and I still think that any one of those teams can win this division. That being said, Alvin Kamara is the X factor in all of that right now, because I still think the Saints are kind of pretenders because of the fact that, well, I'm not certain about, say, the Dallas Cowboys right now. Because that win, while impressive, we've seen that blueprint before from some different teams. That's what my boss has been talking about. We've seen the ground and pound blueprint for beating Dallas before. So it's not like the Saints really came out there and beat a good defense into a pulp in a way that nobody's ever seen. I want to see them do it week in, week out with consistency, and I want to see Alvin Kamara be the centerpiece of this offense while Derek Carr plays complementary football. But at the end of the day, I'm liking what I see so far from the New Orleans Saints. So kudos to them. Let's talk about another running back, though. A guy who, for some reason, still isn't technically the starting running back on his team. They've been saying that they've been riding a hot hand, Harbaugh. But this guy's been one of the hottest running backs in the league so far. So I just don't see why they're not handing him the keys to the car just yet. J.K. Dobbins, 17 carries, 131 yards, 1 TD, 20.1 fantasy points. And the reason why J.K. Dobbins might not have won the starting job is, yes, injury, and they want to keep both of them kind of as healthy as possible because technically that's their whole offense right now because of the way that Jim Harbaugh wants to play his philosophy and style of football. But J.K. Dobbins, man, is someone who I've always said, if he can stay healthy, can appreciate the fact that even though he's in a committee approach, he might just be the best running back in that committee approach, then he could be one of the best running backs in the NFL right now. And that's what he's looked like through 2 weeks of play. And seeing as to how the Chargers have the advantage of being 2-0 right now, J.K. Dobbins can become someone who might potentially be our RB1, but could also be an interesting flex option because I still think in the back of my mind that this Harbaugh thing won't work out all the time. And it's the Panthers coming up. They beat the Panthers and they beat the Raiders. So, yes, that plan can work, but 22-10 kind of games don't happen very often in the NFL. And they certainly don't happen in an NFL that wants to get more modernized in terms of offensive schemes. So, I appreciate J.K. Dobbins, but just know that maybe this whole Harbaugh project is a facade of what to see and expect out of the Chargers. But kudos to them for being 2-0, and kudos for J.K. Dobbins for being someone who you could trust early on in the season. Let's talk about a wide receiver who I did not have being one of the better fantasy wide receivers right now on my bingo card this season. How about Chris Godwin? Let me tell you a story about Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin was on my fantasy team. And some of the times, he would be the reason that my fantasy team won, but most of the time last year, he would be the reason my team lost because he didn't have impressive performances. And you can chalk it up to him being in a wide receiver room with one of the best wide receivers of the modern NFL era. But at this current moment in time, Chris Godwin is proving that he might just be one of the best wide receiver twos in the league right now. 7 receptions, 117 yards, 1 TD, 24.7 FP. And let's talk about the Tampa Bay Bucs offense because they are really becoming one of the more attractive teams in the NFL because Baker is getting more confident, because he's starting to trust more offensive minds, because he's starting to understand the nuances of good receivers like Mike Evans and Godwin. And so maybe we should have seen this kind of duality in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense beforehand. But Chris Godwin's really been impressive. And if they can continue this, then maybe my predictions about the NFC South becoming a bit muddy or a moot point because the Bucs just run away with this division. And they got a huge win against Detroit on the road to kind of supplement that theory. But at the end of the day, Chris Godwin's going to always be someone who I kind of want to see more out of and where to really cement his status as a solid wide receiver 2 week in, week out. But right now, the early signs are looking very good. So kudos to Chris Godwin for his improvement and maturation in this offense, along with Baker and Mike Evans. But let's talk about another wide receiver. Let's talk about a rookie guy, a young buck. A guy who, in this first game in the NFL, did not meet expectations. And maybe that was because him and his quarterback weren't gelling. There were some comments made about that. But MHJ and Kyler Murray, in the late window, were two of the best performers and perhaps the best fantasy stars I could have picked this week. In the first quarter alone, 29.9 fantasy points from Marvin Harrison Jr. That would be all he had, and it would be all he needed to have, because the Cardinals really impressed me. even when they were just going down there and kicking field goals. This offense schedule, Kyler was magnificent, perfect passer rating, 266 yards, 3 TDs. And let's talk about how Arizona is in a position right now to either play spoiler or potentially compete for a wild card spot. That's what we're talking about. I really enjoyed watching that offense, even as a Seattle Seahawks fan, even as an NFC West fan. I enjoyed the Arizona Cardinals so much. Not because, they were winning games by hook or by crook, because they took that game against LA by the neck. Yes, you can chalk up to injuries. You can chalk it up to the Rams' offense not being up to par. But it was a huge statement win from this Arizona Cardinals team. I'm really excited going forward to see how this MHJ and Kyler connection pans out, because it could pay dividends in fantasy. If you're having MHJ put up 29.9 points in the first quarter alone, have that be enough to carry you, then that's in your praise. And I told you, Kyler Murray is going to have big performances this season more often than not. As this offense gets more comfortable, Kyler's just going to do and play playground football. And the Cardinals are going to be fun to watch. They're going to put up numbers. And most importantly, they're going to win you fantasy games. So, overall, I'm really confident in this Fantasy Stars list. Couldn't have come up with a better list. You can talk about a lot of players. I could have put my boy Geno Smith on there, throwing the ball as well as anyone in the league right now. But at this current moment in time, all of these Fantasy Stars, whether we expected them or not, really are intriguing as we head into Week 3 of the NFL season. But let me know what you think in the comments. I really enjoyed talking about them. Let me know if you have any other Fantasy Stars that you want to talk about. As Shots Below the Belt says, you writing him off, bro? Ha ha ha. I'm not writing off my man Geno Smith at all. I think that if he's still in deeper leagues on the waiver wire, pick him up immediately, because Geno Smith is someone who I really love, and Seahawks fans have grown to love as well as anyone in the league. So thank you, Shots Below the Belt. But we have to go a quick break. LOL, awesome, says Shots Below the Belt. We have to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll finish the show with some disappointments, so to speak. Players that we're going to have to drop this week, whether due to injury or just because they are underperforming. We'll be right back to finish the show after this quick break.